Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
So, how will Thursday's local election results affect the general election campaign? Who's winning the election grand war? And as he celebrates 100 days in the White House, what will Donald Trump do next? All questions for the week ahead. So, we've got the local elections, we've got metro elections, will be very interesting. Liverpool, Greater Birmingham, the West Midlands. How will they play into the general election?
Significantly. It's very unusual, this. If people keep on comparing this election with 83, if you remember, Margaret Thatcher then was nervous enough to wait until after the local elections before calling the election to see the result. We're getting these results in the sort of middle of an election campaign. So it will be really important, and whoever does well will get momentum. Whoever does badly will suffer a dent in confidence in terms of how they then approach the election. And as you say, we're also going to have these mayoral figures as a reminder of another big difference with the 80s, that however big, say, the Conservatives win in Westminster, there are now these centres of power in other parts of the United Kingdom which weren't there in the 80s.
Because one of the reasons Mrs. Thatcher waited in 83 was that memories were still alive in political circles of 1970. In 1970, Wilson saw the local election results, thought, I can win. Indeed, he was told to win by, he would win by The Economist magazine, who had done the analysis, and of course he lost. So that's why she waited. Mrs. May doesn't have that, didn't wait for that at all now. And I guess on the metro elections, the one she's going to be looking at is the West Midlands. That's the one that's a competition, I would suggest.
I don't think Mrs. May can really lose on Thursday with the local elections. You know, governing parties are supposed to take a fair kicking, losing lots of council seats. Mrs. May is projected to put on 100 or so seats. Labour are projected to lose around about 200 seats now. And, you know, it's the first time the main opposition party has shedded seats since something like 83. So clearly the local elections give Mrs. May great momentum going into the general election campaign. But there's a big downside in that, and this is what you've heard already fighting about this morning. If it looks like it's all going too well for the Tories, then that also says to their own supporters, why bother turning out? So she then comes up with totally unbelievable sound bites this morning. This is the most important general election in her lifetime. Really?
It's always it's always the most important election in my lifetime until the next one. I wonder, though, this business of turnout is really a problem. Tory voters are more likely to vote than Labour voters. If there's a sense that it's all over bar the shouting, the overall turnout will be low, but Tory voters are still likely to turn out more than Labour voters, so she still wins on that basis.
I don't think she needs to be too worried. I do think that there will be a significantly lower turnout. Even I'm finding it hard to be that excited about this general election, so I think
that is definitely... The papers didn't have a lot about it this morning.
You know, really, the policies, we've spent a lot of time talking about them today, and of course we have to examine them, but ultimately all this is about is, do you want Theresa May or do you want Jeremy Corbyn in number 10? I think those are the only questions, apart from possibly how strongly you feel about Brexit, that are going to be on voters' minds.
Well, you may say that, but I will not be put off with going through a list of policies on the hoof that we've already had in past 24 hours. So, on the Conservatives, we've had more powers to stop company bosses underfunding pensions, because Mr. Philip Green was in mind there. Labour has come up with quite a few policies, actually. Give all workers equal rights, whether part-time or full-time, temporary or permanent. With UKIP, we've also had some announcements. Scrap VAT on takeaway food and end the BBC licence fee. And the Liberal Democrats have come out opposed to the runway at Heathrow, though I thought I knew that already. Any of these policies going to make a difference?
Well, they're all nice, handy retail offerings, aren't they? The sort of things that people generally quite like. Probably not, I think, is the answer. A, they're an awful long way out from polling day now for people to really remember and latch on to. B, I don't think you make your mind up on small issues or smallish issues like Heathrow, unless you live in Richmond upon Thames, maybe. But the problem I think Labour have got with unveiling a whole load of these retail-type policies, which in themselves will be very popular, is that no one will listen to them until they get over the leadership credibility issue. Jeremy Corbyn can promise the world on the stick, but don't believes he's able of delivering any of it, then he's not going to be listened to. And he hasn't really done very much, apart from a speech yesterday in which his big claim to fame was getting arrested. I didn't really see how that would work for him getting into number 10. They're not making progress on that.
It's interesting what Tom says there, because Labour has rolled out a number of policies which, taken individually, would have certain traction in normal times. They're also quite interesting ideas. They help. There's this sense of unfairness, of feeling that ordinary workers have not done well out of this recovery, and that those who caused the crash have. 20 points. I'm through some with Mr. Lavery. Put aside the fact they're not costed. We're assured they will be costed. The problem, I would suggest, is not the costing, it's the cut-through.
Yeah, and every election has a context, and the context is determined by opinion polls, however sceptical we are of them these days. And if one party is way ahead, it's very difficult for the other party to appear relevant, because if people assume they're not going to win, and even some of its own MPs are saying, look, we're not going to win this, so you can vote for us, kind of this slightly contorted message. It's very hard to get attention and relevance. Where I think all the parties are really bad with their current leaders is framing arguments. So those policies that you just highlighted make sense. The best leaders are brilliant framers of an argument, and neither Theresa May nor Jeremy Corbyn are any good at that, I think.
Well, they've been campaigning. The manifestos aren't out yet, and they tell us we have to wait before we can get costings. Both sides have been telling us that endlessly, but it hasn't stopped them campaigning. Let's just give you a reminder of where they've been, what they've been doing so far. Let's start with Jeremy Corbyn. His first official visit was in the ultra-marginal Conservative seat of Croydon Central, where the MP, Gavin Barwell, has a lead of just 165. That's not the only Conservative seat he's visited. Along the way, he's popped in on Bristol North West, which has a Conservative majority of nearly 5,000. The Tory seat of Cardiff North, with a Conservative lead of just over 2,000. Warrington South, which has a majority of over 2,700. And Crewe and Nantwich, with a Tory majority of over 3,500. Yesterday he was on safer ground visiting the Labour seat of Bethnal Green and Bow, which is a Labour lead of over 24,000. Theresa May kicked off her campaign in Bolton, which has a Labour majority of over 4,000. On her way around the UK, she had a nice and comfy stop in her own Maidenhead seat, where she's defending a majority of nearly 30,000, before travelling to other Labour marginals, including Dudley North, which is a Labour lead of over 4,000. Bridgend with a lead of just under 2,000, before becoming very ambitious and visiting Shadow Minister Richard Bergen's Leeds East seat, which he won by over 12,500 votes. Yesterday she moved north of the border to Aberdeenshire, where, among other places, she visited the SNP seat of West Aberdeenshire in Kirkcaldy, where the Tories would have to gain over 7,000 votes to unseat the MP. So there we go. What do you make of it all so far, Isabel?
Well, I think it's remarkable that she's doing these visits in Scotland. I mean, cast back sort of even 5 years, and the idea of a Tory Prime Minister going around Scotland would be utterly counterproductive. And actually, they're very ambitious for Scotland now under Ruth Davidson. There's a real prospect of multiple seats, and that would be really a genuine shift in Scottish politics, the like of which we haven't seen for probably 15, 20 years.
And if she gets that... That's what propels her towards that helps towards 100 seats, doesn't it? Because if she wins 10 in Scotland, it's effectively 20, isn't it? The SNP lose 10, she gains 10, she's and she wants to do that in the Midlands with Labour and the North. It is interesting that to get the 100 majority, other than Scotland, she has to win Labour seats. That's all that's there.
Yeah, and clearly she's been told, and it's obvious, that she's got a chance of doing so, else you don't go to these parts of the country in your sort of first few days of the campaign. And all logic points to her being able to pull it off as well. The opinion polls, the state of the Labour Party. The only qualification I have in this is that politics is so wild and febrile at the moment. It doesn't sort of feel like landslide terrain, but all logic points to a landslide.
It's true, doesn't it? It doesn't yet, I mean, it's early days. We haven't yet, the campaign, the manifestos we haven't got, campaign is yet to gather momentum. Doesn't feel like landslide territory.
I disagree with that,
Yeah,
to be honest. I mean, you look at every single poll, the Tory lead in Wales, a 10% Tory lead in Wales. You know, you can see her picking up, 20 seats there. We put all this together, and I'm told, by the way, she's going somewhere very, very traditional Labour heartlands again tomorrow. The key is the UKIP vote. The UKIP vote is going to implode.
Crumble towards the Tories more
And
than
if she can hoover up all that UKIP vote and retain the Remain Tory vote, she's in for a majority of over 150.
Can't let you all go without reminding you that it's Mr. Trump's first 100 days. He's not making much of it now. He made a lot of it during the campaign. This is what he had to say last night.
We are just beginning in our fight to make America great again. Now, before we talk about my first 100 days, which has been very exciting and very productive, let's rate the media's 100 days. Should we do that? Should we do it? Because, as you know, they are a disgrace.
There you go, still bashing the media. That was at a rally in Virginia. The 100 days was last night. That's what marked it. He seems happier at times campaigning mode than actually running the country, campaigning there. You've each got 20 seconds to give me your headline thought on the first 100 days.
Remarkable. He's not going to stop slagging off the media, but I think for me what really strikes is that America First has not actually meant America First in terms of foreign policy. He's completely reneged on what he said on NATO being obsolete.
He's back to a traditional Republican foreign policy.
He's tacking in from the alt-right to the centre because that's where he can get things done. He's a pragmatist. We all thought he would do that. It's happening. Bannon is out, Kirchner in, and also Isabel's friend Nigel Farage is no longer welcome, we read this morning.
Apparently, allegedly.
Quick thought?
He loves campaigning. He finds govening much more difficult.
As he
which
said.
is why, as he's admitted...
Well, this is a bit more... who would have thought being president of the United States was a difficult job?
And he loves these rallies. But being president and politics is very, very difficult and constraining.
It is indeed. Right. I thank you both. There we go. Mr. Trump's first 100 days. We'll see you the next 100 bring.
I've been getting